light for the piano.
Piano light?
Generally, oh, there it is. I can't see very well without it. It used to be that I had young eyes, but you know, the last 30 years I've gotten old.
400 years ago, right?
Yeah. Jurassic age.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right, hot dog.
Now I have to even change my glasses. It's just terrible.
Man, oh man. Well,
There. Now you look
single
blurry.
vision?
Well, this helps us. If I have to read the music for more than about 10 minutes, my eyes won't get tired trying to refocus. So it's a...
Yeah, that's what I do with my computer too.
It's,
I've got
it's,
single
it's the same
vision
glasses I use for the computer screen. And when I
Yeah.
was working for a living, that was important because I was staring at the damn thing for 4 or 5 hours at a
Yeah,
time.
yeah. We didn't have this problem 30 years ago. Well, you had that problem 30
I
years
had
ago
the problem
because
probably
pianos existed.
Yeah, I had a problem with the piano, but also I was a very early adapter with computer screens and stuff. I was actually working with screens back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, really? Oh, man. I resisted like crazy. I didn't get a computer at work until 1994.
And look at you now.
And look at me now. I'm a mess.
Good morning. I'm going to start today's service with an announcement that next Sunday, May 7th, the Craft Group is going to present their annual spring sale. The sale will be held both in Friendship Hall and in the East Room. Be sure to bring your checkbook or cash next week to purchase some great handcrafted items, baked goods, ready-to-go gifts for anyone on your gift-giving list, or even a little something just for you. Then feel good knowing that your purchases will fund projects that help to improve our wonderful church. We're looking forward to seeing you there. And when you talk about the Craft Group, what an important group they are here for us. They have purchased so many things here in the church that we have needed and might not have had the additional money. And if you want to see an example of that, just take a look at the screens today, courtesy of the Craft Group. So good morning. My name is Chuck Berry. I'm the lay leader today. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the North Hills. Whether you've been with this church a decade or more, or this is your first time visiting, we welcome you. Whatever your faith and traditions of your past, we welcome you. Whatever your theological stance, we welcome you. Whoever you are and whomever you love, we welcome you. Wherever you're come from, wherever your journey has been, we welcome you. And newcomers and guests are always welcome to participate in any of the church activities. If you'd like more information about our church or Unitarian Universalism in general, please talk to our Director of Lifespan Faith Development, Dana Poss, or any one of our board members. And you can find contact information for Dana and the board on our website. As our services are currently led by members of this congregation or outside guest speakers, every week will be different. If you're visiting our church for the first time, please come back. We want you to experience the variety of services that are being offered here. Also, if you're a new visitor and you're so inclined, we would love to have you introduce yourself. So if you are and are willing, please raise your hand and someone will come around with a microphone. Do we have any takers? Yes, we do.
Hi, my name's Mimi Carlson. I'm a brand new grandmother to Isla. Meeting her. I'm visiting with the Quaker tradition as my background, so not too far removed from what is going on here today. Thank you for having me.
Welcome and congratulations. Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Alice Fuchs. Not my first time, but I was here a couple other times. But I'm grandmother to Estella and mother to Anna and Ariel. So I like being here very much. I went to the Unitarian Church years and years ago. I was married once in the Unitarian Church in Pittsburgh. So I really enjoy coming here. Thank you.
Welcome. This seems to be Grandmother's Day. Welcome. Anyone else? All right, thank you. And please join us for coffee hour following the service. Again, welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of the North Hills. It's good to be together in person and with all of our friends on YouTube as well. And now, to welcome some new members that we have to our church, welcome Jen Sir and Michael Horowitz.
Good morning. Our church has been organized for more than 60 years, seeking a higher purpose as a community. This builds on the rich history of Unitarianism and Universalism principles, free religious thought stretching back for centuries. We are always happy to find new people to join us on a path of love, justice, and freedom of thought. Would those of you who recently signed our membership book please come forward to be properly welcomed into our congregation. As your name is read, please step forward and be recognized. Jeff Coleman. Isaac Elias. Scott Gorham. Susan Minton. Jonathan Murray. Sarah Murray. Marcia Padone. And Aaron Rogers and John Rogers, who I believe are not here today. New members, do you affirm your desire to become a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the North Hills, to walk together as a member of our congregation, covenanted in love, adding your strengths and talents, sharing our triumphs and struggles as our community grows? If so, say, we will. Do you, this congregation, welcome these new members into our midst and pledge to help them grow as they take their place among us? Will you work with them, offering our love? If so, say, "We will." We will. To all of our new members, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Hal, I got to wipe the tears out of my eyes. Jeez. You got to know me and dinosaurs. Okay. First slide. In the beginning was the performance. Not the words alone, not the deed alone, but both, each indelibly marked with the other forever. Okay, that was from John Dominic Crossan's The Historical Jesus. It's a landmark book. We've got a few other parts of it coming. Let's light the chalice. First reading, also from The Historical Jesus. He came as yet unknown into a hamlet in Lower Galilee. He's watched by the cold, hard eyes of peasants living long enough at subsistence level to know exactly where the line is drawn between poverty and destitution. He looks like a beggar, yet his eyes lack the proper cringe, his voice the proper whine, his walk the proper shuffle. He speaks about the rule of God, and they listen, as much from curiosity as anything else. What they really want to know can this kingdom of God do for a lame child, a blind parent, or a demented soul screaming its tortured isolation at the edge of the village? Okay, hit it. Second reading. To those first followers who asked how to repay his cures, he gave a simple answer. Simple, that is, to understand, but hard as death to undertake. You are healed healers, he said, so take the kingdom to others, for I am not its patron, and you are not its brokers. It is, was, and always will be available to whoever wants it.
And now, our hymn for today, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky, number 203 in the gray hymnal. The words will also be on the screen. Would everyone please stand as you are willing and able?
Time for all ages, especially the kids. If you're a kid, come on up. Yeah, I brought some stuff to show you. And let's see, we've got a slide we can put up on the screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, everybody who's a kid, everybody who wishes he was a kid. Come on, I'll sit here. How about that? I'm gonna sit here. Okay. where have I seen you guys before? Thank you for coming. Man, thank you for coming, John. Okay. Yeah, this is a story for all ages, and it's something I've told at different dinosaur talks that I've done. Matter of fact, we're going to do one here, May 28th. If your kids got nothing else to do, on a Sunday morning, I'm going to bring all my dinosaurs in, even just this little sampling, and we'll talk about dinosaurs for a longer time then. But right now, I wanted to tell you this story. Believe it or not, there was a time when people thought that all the animals that we see today are all the animals that ever were. Yeah, really. So if you saw a bird in the sky, well, birds have always been around, so no big surprise there. If you see an ostrich, you say, well, okay, that's just a big bird. No big deal. It's, you know, it's a type of animal. It's always been around. Well, that idea kind of went out the window about 200 years ago. And it flabbergasts me that it's already 200 years, because when I was a little kid, it wasn't 200 years. Sigh. I'm a lot older than I look. But, yeah. But anyway, there were two people. You see them up on the screen there. One's named Gideon. The other one's named Mary Ann. And they like fossils. And one day Mary Ann found some and brought them to her husband. He was the guy who was the authority. And so that one, this one right here, he handed it, Jane, he handed it to her husband, said, he didn't know what in the world it was, but he didn't want to tell her that. So he said, did you find anything else? She said, yeah, found this. The heck is this? Well, he said the same thing. That's what really stuck-up educated people say when they don't know what in the world they're. But anyway, so he said, where did you find these things? And she took them out and showed him. They were on the ground. There were some other bones there too. Now remember, they had to fit. Whatever bones they found had to fit into the animals that they knew. So he looked at them really close, all the bones together, and he said, it's an iguana lizard. Let's move to the next slide there. There we go. It's an iguana lizard. Of course it's an iguana lizard. They've got enough bones for that, they thought. He drew a picture of it up there, the white one in the left. And he said, well, what was this? Well, some iguanas have horns in their noses, so he just said it was a nose horn. Now, there was one problem with this idea. The iguana was 60 feet long. Now, you can grow a long iguana, but you start here, and maybe you'll end up here. This is still enough for you to reserve a whole room to the iguana. There won't be any room left for you, but that's this big. This thing was immense. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, they were so proud of themselves that they had identified this animal as an animal that existed today at that time, that they built a model, and it was so big, they took off the top and had a dinner for 13 scientists on the inside. Yeah, that's it right there. Waterhouse Hawkins made it and drew the picture, and it was a real celebration in the first half of the 1800s. And then they found something called an articulated skeleton, sometimes called an oops. Because when they saw it, they realized, no, that's not what the animal looked like. Matter of fact, the hand was a particular problem. Let's all make iguanodon hands. That's, by the way, what they named it. They should have named it Fred, but they didn't. They just named it iguanodon. Put your hand out like this. Just one hand. There you go. All right? Now, spread your pinky out to the side and keep your middle three fingers together. Can you do that? All right. Now, the horn that they thought was on his nose turned out to be a thumb spike. And there it is up there. Can you believe that? My goodness. And the hand was this big. The whole animal really was huge. Live long and prosper. But yeah, really, this was one heck of a strange animal. And they realized this is something we never knew existed before. They didn't know about dinosaurs, but they learned. When they found more skeletons like that, they knew that other animals like it and very different from it existed too. Like this guy over here. Anybody know who he is? It's a what? Tyrannosaurus rex. And this is a small head. His head was about this big. If I put it on my lap, it would break both my legs because it weighed 700, 800 pounds. The teeth were about like that, like bananas, that big. So, and this thing here, oh my goodness, this is a fingernail. And it's a dinosaur. Let me see your finger. Put your finger out. Nah, it's not going to fit. Want to see what the animal looked like? Okay, right here. This was a cousin of a T-Rex. He had a big belly, a small head. He ate plants, not people. Well, not people, but other animals. And he had 10-foot long arms. They found the arms first and were totally confused. They thought they'd found a 200-foot long Tyrannosaurus. They didn't. They just found a really silly looking animal with very big arms. Coolest thing? He had feathers. Dinosaurs had feathers? We'll talk all about that in a couple of weeks. The end of May, May 22nd, 28th. We'll do that probably in the East Room. That's right, but we didn't know that back then. We'd never seen a velociraptor. This is way, but this is like mid-1800s that we found out all of this stuff. So. That's right. Give me 5. Okay. All righty. Let me get to the rest of this. And you've got your classes to go to. So let's sing them out, and we'll get on with the next step.
Things I didn't know. I'm Lynn Richards from the Lay Pastoral Care Team. During our service, we create this sacred space for sharing within our community. It is a time to share significant life passages with the congregation so that you can be held in loving care. I'll be reading the joys and sorrows this morning, and it's Susan Powers this morning who will be placing a stone representing each joy or sorrow in the sand. The sand represents our congregation, supporting our sorrows and lifting up our joys. In addition to the big joy of welcoming and sharing the greeting of all our new UUCNH members, we also have a joy from Karen and Brian Franco. They say, our daughter Megan will be graduating from the University of Pittsburgh today with high honors, a dual degree in theater and psychology, a minor in history, and certificates in Russian, Eastern European, and Eurasian studies. She'll be working with the Maine State Music Theater for this summer season. So congrats to Megan and her family, and to them we say, we share in your joy. We now place one more stone in the sand for all those joys and sorrows that exist in our hearts but remain unspoken today. From far and near, please say with me our caring words. Let us hold in our circle of caring each person here. Let us hold in our hearts those who are unable to be with us today. Let us hold in our memories those who have moved on. Let us find comfort in knowing that we are not alone.
Okay. All right. Let's let's take a moment or two to clear our throats. There. Relax. Close your eyes. And let's just take it down a notch for a minute. If you're the type that likes to tense and relax muscles to relax, now's the time to do it. Tense your arms for a couple of seconds. Keep the rest of your body relaxed. Okay, now let's do the same with the legs. The same with your back and your neck. And relax everything. And let's just use imagination here for a minute. Okay, you're in the middle of an open field. It's beautiful out. It's a nice sunny day. Temperature's about 105. And okay, you're dressed accordingly. Okay, nobody's sweating their last. But you walk straight ahead towards a grove of trees, and you can hear some gurgling, burbling on the other side of it. There's a river there. And you walk through the trees to the edge of the water, and you see a fairly clear flow all the way downstream. And you think, boy, that's nice, cool water there. You're not quite ready to get in, though. You walk instead along the shore, and you walk. You're in the shade. The trees are shading you. You're okay. Down a ways from you, to your left, there's another fella scratching his head. Yeah, he's trying to get to the other side of this small river. But there's no boat. There's no bridges. And so he decides to wade in. And he's up to his knees by the time he falls for the first time, splat, and his pants are soaking wet. He gets up, walks a little more, and goes splat once more, and then again, until finally he gets over to the other side of this thing, and he's still scratching his head. Well, you laugh for a little bit, but you move on. And as you look down, you see the bottom of the river. It's rocky, not full of sand and silt. And down there you see big depressions, half the size of a bathtub for some of them. Others have strange three-toed marks, and they're a foot long. All of a sudden you begin to think there was life here before my walking today. You walk a little further and the tracks walk with you, about 100 feet or so. And as they do, you begin to think of the kind of animal that might have been there. Those big bathtub-sized footprints probably belonged to a critter with a really long neck and a long tail. The three-toed marks are something else again. That was probably a meat eater. You imagine to yourself what these creatures might have looked like, and how small you might have been by comparison. And then the image fades. You're at the end of the stand of trees. You're back in the field. wondering what happened to that guy who got himself soaking wet, tripping over things in the river. But we'll leave that till later. Okay, slowly open your eyes. And we'll do the next thing in the service.
Now, please join me in affirming our mission statement, which will be seen up on the screens. By building a loving religious community that nourishes the spirit, celebrates life, and cherishes the connectedness of all things, we will transform ourselves and our world. And we know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We're very grateful for this, and we commit together to ensure that the funds that we do gather collectively go to a greater good for ourselves and our world than we could have done alone. The Share the Plate recipient for April is the Clean Air Council's Direct Support Fund for the people of East Palestine, Ohio, and Darlington, PA. The Clean Air Council is a member-supported environmental organization dedicated to protecting and defending everyone's right to a healthy environment. The Clean Air Council staff have been working to connect with people in East Palestine, Ohio, impacted by the horrific derailment of Norfolk Southern trains carrying hazardous petrochemicals. Right now, the top priority is to provide immediate material support to as many affected people as possible. So will you help us today by donating so that we can support residents with equipment to better protect them in the wake of this train derailment? Now, if you're here with us today in person, the collection baskets will now be passed, or you can take your offering to the basket in the back. If you're joining us virtually, you can make your offering by mailing a check to the church or going to the uucnh.org website, finding the link in the upper right-hand corner that says Donate, and making a contribution equivalent to what you would be putting into the plate today or more. And if you're visiting us for the first time, please feel free to let the basket pass. Thank you, Hal. And now, if you'd please join me in saying the dedication of the offering. The words will be on the screen. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to all we stand for as a community of faith. And now, what you've all been waiting for, here's Tony.
Oh, brother. Dog, now I better be good. Sugar. For 31 years, the Jesus Discussion Group has been here at UU, and the questions of what goes on in there have been circulating and like that. And of course, now you know it's dinosaurs. But it has been a long haul, and I wanted to use this time to give you a feel for the kind of material that we talk about. It's about a 3-year turnaround, though, you know, that's very flexible depending on what people want. And like I say, it started off in 1992, and I want to give a special shout out to Craig Thompson, who was there at the very first meeting, and he brought a couple of books to hit me in the head with, and he was at the last one we did. And thank you very much, Craig. He's always a very critical, insightful person to have at a meeting like this, and yeah, he kept me straight, taught me a lot, and we've exchanged books over the years, so it was cool. That was the least I could do. You were trying for the least? Okay. Now, let me get this off my screen. The Paleontology of Theology. I wrote this book about 5-6 years ago. It's a collection of 80 letters out of the 100 or so that I wrote to a gentleman named Gene Lauer, who left me at the age of 83 to go to his reward. How unfair of him, without even asking. But a good, productive person. I'm so glad I got to know him. This man had a very good heart. He knew an awful lot, and he put up with the wildest, nastiest questions I could ask. And he taught me how to answer them with dignity and with an eye on learning without any rancor. A very, very good man. The other part of this that I'd like to thank is you, all of you people, you, and you, and all of you, because it's only in a surrounding like this that you're going to get the chance to let your thoughts blossom. There are as few restrictions here as I've ever seen anywhere. We don't know how lucky we are. Okay, back to the book. In the book, somewhere in there, I got this idea, and I put it up here in big yellow words, because this is the way I felt about the story of Christianity. I was trying to work it all out in my own head. It was a lot of stuff I had to figure out. And it was at that point that I realized that for the average person who says, I believe, they need to understand that there is a more naturalistic way of telling the Jesus story. It involves biblical criticism, a number of other things I'll show in a minute. But in broadening those brushstrokes, the viewer sees the ambiguity behind the doctrine. And in that divergence, the extent of his faith comes into focus. And when you realize what you're saying by I believe, this makes your faith stronger, if that's where you're coming from, if that's what your deepest innermost feeling is. If it's not, well, you know that too. You know that you have work to do. but it's a good thing to know. Anyway, it's in my book somewhere. I said, yeah, that looks good, so I put it on the cover. Let's move along. I had a vision as I was going to sleep a month or two ago that said, yeah, it's a lot like dinosaurs. No, really. The bones of the Jesus story are like the bones that we've put together for dinos over the last 150 years or so. We didn't know what dinosaurs looked like. Actually, they're destroying the Tyrannosaurus for me. When I went to see him in the 50s in the American Museum of Natural History in New York, he was posed Godzilla style. Well, now he's all hunched over. He has feathers. He has lips. I want to see the teeth. Don't put lips on. Well, all right, whatever they find, that's what they find. But we find these things out a little bit at a time, ever renewing, ever getting closer to the truth. And that works too for the Jesus story. It's only in the last few hundred years that we've realized that what we're looking at in the Bible, the words, they're copies of copies of copies. There are 5,400 copies in Greek, and no two of them are the same. Now, that doesn't mean that these are all meaningful differences. It might be a scribe who forgot a line, just as he was copying, missed a line. No big deal. Or they transpose words unintentionally. But also there are changes in meanings based on the people who are doing the writing and deciding that, no, it should have said this, not that. I'll show you some examples. It went from Greek to the Latin to the vernacular. More important, and this is in a good book, I gave you a copy, Craig, called Trusting Doubt by Valerie Terrico, in which stories start in the oral tradition, and subtractions and additions are made as needed. And then somebody writes them down, and that gives a sense of permanence to them. Some ideas are in, others are out. Then these are collected into one document and canonized. More concrete. The printing press finished things off pretty good. Now everybody could read the Bible, could buy a copy, and at this point, the oral stories are so far in the background that it's hard to pull them out, but we can do it. I'll show you some examples. So, how do you get from this to this? Now, I just saw those yesterday. I was with my grandnieces at the museum. There's a skeleton that looks pretty much the way an Allosaurus and a Apatosaurus look. Notice there's no meat on the bones. The meat is your faith. The meat is the things that you conclude from the bones that we've found. That's where you come into play. In the Jesus discussion group, what we've looked at over the years are the ideas of the historical Jesus, the events of the historical Jesus life, his personal history. Yeah, believe it or not, he probably had one. 4 brothers, 2 sisters. The brothers had names, the sisters we don't know. What did he really teach? We'll talk about that. Biblical criticism and how does that modify what we know about Jesus? And then, of course, there's the most important thing to so many Christians, the idea that Jesus has become like God or equal to God in their own minds. And how did that happen? That's a whole story. It's a cool story, but it's something to jump into a piece at a time. And once again, you don't do that in 20 minutes here. You do it in the Jesus discussion group where you've got time for detail and also time for talk back. We do a lot of that too. Okay, the bones of the story and the tracks of the story. The bones are these. From the year 30, when Jesus was around, remember, Jesus wrote nothing down himself, but from 30 to 50, 20 years after his death, everything was oral. It was all stories told among the Jesus followers. And the Jesus followers traveled, so the stories traveled a good bit too. In the year 50, we find the first letters of Paul. It's one of the few places where we think we've identified the writer of the section of the New Testament. We find Paul's letters, some Deutero-Paul letters, ones that are written like Paul, but they're not him. There are also sayings that have been collected into books. One we have, the Gospel of Thomas. One we don't have, Q. That's short for Kvela. Jan, wherever you are, I hope I'm saying that right. It's German for source. And Q has a very interesting place in those bones of the Jesus story. It's only in the year 70 that you get to the Gospels. And these Gospels tell you 4 different stories of Jesus. There were a lot of others that didn't make it to the New Testament. It's okay. In the Jesus discussion group, we find out why these made it, why the others didn't. And then from 100 to 300, you have the church fathers and what's called the Apocrypha, Gospels that fill in around the edge of the Jesus story. Okay, now you remember the river you walked beside? That's the river. Excuse me. That's the Paluxy River, also known as Roland Goes for a Swim. That fella that tripped all over himself in the water is part of a story I tell the kids during my dinosaur presentations. And in the mid-50s, Roland Bird, who was a scientist, really did that. And he was so confused by all the holes in the bottom of the river, he emptied the river. No, really. And what he found at the bottom of the river was this. When he cleaned it all up, look at the little kid. That little kid is sitting in the back footprint of a long neck and having a ball. When they cleaned everything up, what they saw was about a 100-foot trackway of a long neck, and right next to him were the 3 toes of a meat eater. If you go all the way to the back of the right-hand picture, what you'll notice is that the right footprint of the meat eater is missing. And no, the long neck didn't eat it. They always ask me that. What we think was happening was the meat eater was climbing up in the back of the long neck. We were seeing dinosaur behavior as opposed to the bones. This tells us what dinosaurs did back then. Now, do we have trackways in oral tradition? Oh boy, do we ever. I didn't know this. I had to learn this bunches of years ago. If you look in a bunch of Gospels and epistles, every once in a while you'll find a piece of oral tradition. We know it's there because the writing style all of a sudden changes. It's not the person who wrote the rest of the document. And these are all over the place, and they give us wonderful insight into what people believed back then. Now, keep in mind, the epistles were written at 50. Jesus died at 30. So you got 20 years to play with, which is more than enough time for legends to build up, but not whole bunches. There are going to be some things that translate. Okay, want to see a piece of oral tradition? Here's one. This is in Paul's epistle to the Corinthians, and it's the first time, the earliest time we see mentioned the resurrection. Jesus was buried, died, was buried, and raised up on the 3rd day according to the scriptures, and then Paul lists people that Jesus appeared to. And at the bottom of the last line you see, And last of all, he appeared to me as to one abnormally born. He's talking about the way he first experienced the risen Jesus. But this is the only place in the New Testament where you hear an eyewitness say, I saw Jesus. And this is not in the style of the rest of the letter. And he says so right at the beginning. He's passing on something that he heard. What's the point? The point is that this idea predates the year 50. Now we're moving back into the 40s. And the closer you get to the time of Jesus, the less time there is for a story to develop. This is the way historians go about trying to separate what's legend from what might have really happened. Okay, now that doesn't say this really happened, but what it does is it gives you a little bit of evidence for that. More trackways. These are amazing. Matthew and Luke pulled their gospels from Mark. Mark was about 70, Matthew and Luke about 85 to 90. And Matthew and Luke wholesale pull big chunks of their gospel from Mark. In that, too, are bits of something called Q. They think it's a sayings gospel, which probably predates any kind of narrative. Q. And they see the same sayings in Matthew and in Luke, and they're not in Mark. So Matthew and Luke had their own sources outside of this. And here's more trackways to tell you where they got these ideas. General gospel progression starts with oral, probably goes to Q with some input from Thomas, and a really cool gospel that is way out there, definitely not mainstream, called the Gospel of Peter. Mark, the earliest narrative that we know of that's complete, flows into Matthew and Luke, and then there's John, a whole different gospel in which now Jesus is considered to be a being that predated his earthly life and went back up to heaven as essentially co-God. Now, you can work with the words and what the concepts are. A lot of them did, but John is the reason why so much of the Jesus phenomenon changed from a philosophy about what Jesus believed to one where they were worried like crazy, who the heck was Jesus? And lots of offshoots of Christianity came based on that. Now, check this next part out. This is cool. With the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you can put them side by side and see the same writing. I picked one little story as a good example of that. You remember the story where the man comes up to Jesus and says, "What must I do to gain eternal life?" And Jesus says, "Well, you got the rules right there. You know, don't kill, don't steal, da-da-da-da." And he said, No. I want to be perfect. And Jesus said, "Well, if you want to be perfect, sell everything you have and come follow me." Now, that story is in almost the same form in Mark chapter 10 and Matthew chapter 19. Matthew stole the story from Mark. But here's the twist. This is what's cool. This is the hand of the evangelist. This is how you know that these guys were not writing newspaper history. They put their own 2 cents worth in. In Mark, there's the words, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And just underneath that, Jesus says to him, "Why do you call me good? There's only one that's good, and that's God." In Matthew, the words change. He says, "Teacher, what good deed must I do to get eternal life?" And Jesus says, "Why do you ask me about what is good?" The writer is circumlocuting, is that a word? An idea. He doesn't want Jesus saying, "I'm not good." He doesn't want to put Jesus in that corner. But he thought enough of the story to retain the rest of it. So it all duplicates except for that one little line. That's the hand of the evangelist writing and rewriting his story. This happens often, And this happens in much, much more serious situations. These are the kinds of things we get into into the discussion group. So, track ways of thought. We consider everybody from atheist all the way to conservative. By atheist, I mean Stephen Hawking, Daniel Dennett, agnostic scholars such as Bart Ehrman, Elaine Pagels, Reza Aslan did a great book called The Zealot, which has an interesting idea about Jesus. There's Gene Lauer over there. He's on the believer side, but he's very liberal. And that's why we could make a connection. Dunn, Meyer, JBC is the Jerome Biblical Commentary. It's a great encyclopedia. If they've got an analysis for every line in the whole Old and New Testament. Lacona and Lewis, well, you've heard of C.S. Lewis. He's over on the conservative side, too. Okay, what does that leave you? It leaves you with, and this is where it differs from dinosaurs, you don't get one idea of flesh and blood, but you get a million different ideas of who Jesus was. In the eyes of some, he was a cynic sage or a Jewish rabbi. He could have been an eternally existing co-God. That's John. It seems more than likely he was an apocalypticist, which means that one of the things Jesus believed was the end of the world was coming. In Mark's gospel, that's really the case. He says, some of you might not die before God comes in glory to judge people. Homeless promoter of commensality with the destitute. That's John Dominic Crossan's idea. I lean towards his idea, which is why I chose the opening readings that I did. So where do you get Jesus' philosophies from? What are they? Everybody pretty much agrees on love, friends and enemies. That was something that raised eyebrows. Forgiveness. That's a central theme of his. The coming kingdom, like I mentioned, he talks about this over and over. It gets to the point as time goes by with Mark, Matthew, Luke, and then John, the coming kingdom changes from something that is going to happen very soon to something that's going to happen way in the future to something that happens internally, enlightenment. And then finally, it's already happened. You missed it. You didn't really. God already judged you. That's in John. Commensality and the poor. The idea that the last almsgiving is the last great defense against commensality. The idea of inviting somebody you don't know or you barely know into your own world, whether it's across your doorway or sitting down and talking with somebody, newcomers, anybody. The idea of pulling in a community of your own. That was essentially Jesus. And he wasn't interested in peasants. He was interested in the destitute. These are his own words. Well, almost. I threw some ringers in there. I'd love to know which ones you think are the ringers. But you can take a quick look at those, read them. Some are kind of strange. But that's what a historian will take seriously as being Jesus' real sentences. Okay, now back to dinosaurs. Speciation. If you have distance plus differences of environment and a lack of interaction, what you get are different looking creatures that can no longer interbreed. Dinosaurs were filthy with that kind of stuff. Over 150 million years and the whole planet Earth to play with, including volcanic eruptions, tectonic plate moving, all of that kind of stuff. They turned into all of these different types, long necks, horned dinosaurs, ones with beautiful pointed dinner plates on their backs, everything. They were a pretty wild bunch. It happened the same way with Christianity. Think of the year 30, 35, 40, and they're moving all through the Mediterranean area. You see the spots? Those are the areas that, as of the year 300, Christians had settled in. Communication wasn't particularly great. People's ideas inbred, and so there were a lot of different ideas about essentially who Jesus was. Theological speciation, that's what happened. You got everything from Docetists, who thought Jesus was a spirit and never really suffered anything, to Ebionites or Coptics, who thought Jesus was just a person. Arians and Marcionites thought Jesus was a co-God. Only God the Creator was greater than he was. And more battles. The Council of Nicaea tried to take care of the Arians. It took time, 100 years before they were all gone. So how fast did they move? By the year 350, half of the Roman Empire was Christian. Boy, there's a lot of history involved in that. This is not miraculous. This rate of growth, 40% every decade, is happening with Mormons today. So this is real. This can happen. And so the story begins. Next month, third Sunday of May, we're going to talk about the resurrection. We're kind of in the middle of this cycle. We'll talk about the stories, which were the most important, which were the earliest, all of that kind of stuff. And we'll move on with this kind of curriculum from there. Third Sunday of every month, upstairs, follow the yellow signs. So, okay. Just got some closing words, and we're done. Okay. You got closing words up? There we go. Okay. With apologies to a good friend of mine, Jim Morrow, who wrote some great books. As Jesus sat by the Jordan, ladling water to thirsty immigrants who just crossed the desert, his cranky, stubborn, and emotionally rudderless younger sister approached, shaking her own ladle over her head and yelling, "Is this the right answer?" Forever calm, her brother smiled and answered, "You know it is." Still pouting, she sat down next to him at the shore and began filling the cups of the many who journeyed. Jesus kissed her on the cheek. "I'll make a Jew out of you yet, daughter of God." Chapter 2. That day, the guru's sermon consisted of a single sentence. "I just sit by the river's edge, selling river water." That's it. Okay.
And for the rest of the story, and any of you who know Tony knows that he could go on and on and on. There's a lot of information here, and you're going to have to go and follow those signs and go see his classes. They are fascinating. And I just want to note one quick thing. It's always wonderful to see the blending of our church, UUCNH. And today we've seen Hal, who's been around and doing this for a long time, Tony, who's been doing this for a long time. We talked about Craig Thompson. And at the same time, we have 9 new members here who are bringing new life, new energy to the church as well. So it's a good day for UUCNH. Thank you.
very good. And then 126. The very last notes he wrote, the jokes. Yeah. Actually, Fear the Least was one of these things. Yes, yeah. I mean, he was very, very serious work at the end of his life, but he also had some fun. He was suffering, and the times he had to have a release.